welcome for attending this first GIS course. It's an absolute privilege for myself. My name is Rion Lerm from the South African Environmental Observation Network. So today I'm going to chat to you a little about a GIS e-learning introduction course. And I want to give you a bit of context where this all came about. So quite a couple of years ago, I think at least about half a decade ago, we read an article, my colleagues and I, in a popular magazine. I think it was Position IT. Those of you who do subscribe to that magazine. And we came across an article where it says that there are high school children in South Africa are not attempting the GIS questions in their final exams. And we actually set about to develop a GIS course that we have presented to teachers as well as learners across South Africa, a couple of hundred of those. And it started actually out as a paper-based activity, believe it or not. This type of material we will be able to make available to anyone and any school teacher. But that was really cool because children did not need, and teachers did not need, computers in their classrooms to do this GIS course. And since then, we've amended it, and it's become an e-learning material. And this is what you see in front of you here today. Now, this would not have been possible without a number of people and my colleagues, and specifically those people listed here at the bottom: Dr. Hayden Wilson, Kogi Governor, Caitlin Ransom, Bonolo Mokwatse, and Keneil Shlahane. Myself have been an editor. You know, we've done a couple of workshops, but today it's not going to be the form of a workshop. The idea is that I introduce you to this course, which even though it talks about curriculum, which is the South African schooling system, this course introduces anyone wanting to start and learn GIS. It deals with a lot of theory, and it's got a bunch of activities. And with this e-learning material specifically, we even included a valuable software package, in my opinion. And I'm sure some of my other co-presenters who will be presenting in the weeks after me will agree that we've even included a section on Google Earth Pro, how to use Google Earth Pro. Now, where I started off with GIS is I'm completely self-taught. And I started at university already during my postgraduate studies, eventually lecturing part-time postgraduate students. These days at the South African Environmental Observation Network, I'm a GIS technician to many interns and postgraduate students, and also some of the local staff that need stuff done rather. But specifically, my interest these days lies more and more with remote sensing. And how to work with remote sensing data, specifically with regards to drone footage acquired from drone data. I'm at the moment busy doing drone flights over conservation areas for mapping large trees, and then obviously also satellite imagery. But this specific presentation is not going to go into that depth. It will mention, and it does mention, quite a bit about remote sensing and some more technical aspects. So what I would like to do today is take you through this e-learning course material that we have developed. And the idea is that between today and our following meeting date, which if I'm not mistaken, is the 25th or the 18th of April, that will be confirmed later, I would like you to go and try your hand at this course. And then the second session with me will take on the form of a Q&A, very similar to what Jonathan Gatworth is going to be doing with you guys, but where we specifically discuss some of the details and some of the workflows that I will be showing you in this course. I have to say as well, the course focuses on Google Earth Pro. It makes use of Google Earth Pro, Quantum or QGIS. And then obviously you just need to have a web browser to be able to access this e-learning material. But the idea is to get you to run through this course, especially if you've never embarked and stuck your toes into GIS waters before, and then come back on the 25th or the 18th, the date will still be confirmed, where we have a Q&A and where I can answer any of your questions, and where there is also the opportunity to, if possible, point out any flaws and any suggestions for this course specifically. So thank you very much for attending. It is a huge privilege. I am the editor on, as you can see there, of this manual because of my involvement since the start. And so definitely we would like to know any comments or feedback. Now, after this presentation, I will make available, and via Share Screen Africa, you will receive an email with links to this course and to the software packages used in this course. So basically, this is what the course looks like. It's got these different sections, and you can click on each of these sections, work through it, and once you're done with that section, it'll actually have a little tick mark next to the side. Now, this is a very basic system at the moment. You know, it's not going to, for example, remember your last progress. And if, for example, the computer bombs out or something happens, you're probably going to have to start over again. But fortunately, you can start or continue from any section. There will just not be the little tick marks on the side here. So typically this course, as I've mentioned, it takes on the form of quite a bit of theory. And then you will see here there are various activities. There's about 4 or 5 activities here that deals with various aspects of GIS. But one of the things is that our GIS, this e-learning material, is quite environmentally focused. And also a little bit to do, you'll also notice, schooling based. So we will deal quite a bit with where schools are located and things like that. So geographic information systems, one of the first things you will come across with one of the first points is there's a beautiful video from Esri, Ireland, that explains why GIS is important. So today I'm not going to go through each of these sections with you. I'm going to show you a couple of these sections and what they look like, and some of the activities. One of my colleagues, Caitlin Ransom, did a sterling job developing these little walkthroughs, which actually shows you where to click in Quantum GIS to be able to import data, to check things like coordinate reference systems, to make sure that the data that you import and the reference system that you're working on your map or on your canvas are similar. So it's been a document or a learning material in the making over about at least half a decade or so. But yeah, so, you know, GIS is very important, and I think and I think that's why all of you are attending, is because it's making its way into society more and more. And as I said at the introduction with the video, you will see Esri Island explains it, and it's really taking tabulated data and putting it on a map and making it easy for most people to digest, government departments and so forth. So I'm going to go with you through a little bit of the course and what these various sections are. So obviously we've got something like a preface. When you click on each of this, it will minimize, and keep in mind on your left hand side is the section or the pane where you can browse the various sections of this material. So yeah, it chats a little bit about South African Environmental Observation Network. It's a government organization, a government business unit that I work for, and you know why we have done this. And then we go into things which you can probably skip, and this has got regards to CAPS. Now, CAPS is the South African curriculum system used in the schools, and you will notice that from grade 10 or so, grade 10, 11, and 12, those last 2 years of a child's schooling in South African government schools deal quite a bit with GIS. And so, you know, what's brought this whole thing about, and what we've noticed over time, is despite the fact that the reason why some of the children are not attempting GIS questions in the schools is because the teachers are not educated. The teachers have never ever received any type of training or education on what GIS is. And that's why this course specifically, especially in its paper format, you know, that can accommodate rural schools, you know, is specifically good and is specifically aimed at teachers as well, because it's obvious that how can a teacher teach a child something if they themselves don't understand the concepts? So this is typically a section that you can skip if you are a university student, and then you can go on to things like the introduction. It chats about geography. So it's GIS and geography basically goes hand in hand. And I think part of the reasons why I enjoy GIS so much these days, and why it became something that I pursued in my career, despite not having any formal qualification in GIS, is the fact that I enjoy geography and map reading and things like that so much. And if you're someone that really enjoyed geography at school, you are really going to enjoy GIS as well, and working with software packages like Google Earth Pro. So we go into things like spatial data. As with anything in life, there are important concepts to understand first. And so there are not many concepts in our e-learning material, but they are very important concepts. So some of you may have heard about concepts like polygons, points, and polylines and things like that. And these are very important concepts to understand. Some of them are more difficult. For example, when we talk about concepts like raster data, it's often I get that question, what is raster data and what is vector data? So these are the two types of data that we cover in this course, and that it needs to be explained. So, but to backtrack a little bit, GIS is the science of mapping, I think, and it's all about maps. When we talk about GIS, the end product at the end of the day, often, in my case these days, it's more data than map making, but often at the end of the day, GIS is about creating maps, taking tabulated information that's maybe in a spreadsheet and putting it on the Earth's surface, because anyone can understand it and one can quickly see patterns. And so it's small sections. It's really not a lot to read with this manual. It's been kept simple. We're trying to use quite a bit of figures, tables to make it easy. And here you can see the different types of maps and so forth. Please do take note, there's little drop-down menus here. So you need to click on the little plus sign on the right-hand side to expand. This is really this is probably one of the most interactive e-learning materials that I've come across ever, especially when we get to things like the activities later on. But please do, when there's little pluses like that, take note that is meant for expanding, and to get the information out of that, you need to click on these little pluses on the right-hand side. And then also here, there's these little flip cards I want to show you. It's really cool. I mean, my colleagues have really gone all out to develop the nitty-gritty and the details of this course. And so location where we are, and then it gives us a little bit of information. So when you see little blocks like this, try and click on things. I think it's very important for you to understand, as students and anyone else who you share this link with, by the way, you are more than welcome to do this. You will notice that with this e-learning material at the moment, there's no registration process required, and it is free, by the way. If I haven't mentioned that already, it's completely free, just like watching these amazing Share Screen Africa series. So do interact with this e-learning material, because it is going to provide you with all the necessary information. The rest of it is pretty basic. Here you can see it's one of the products of Dr. Wilson, where, I think one of the activities deals with that. It's possibly the following activity deals with conservation areas and protected areas. And this is not something you can necessarily interact with, but have a look here. You've got little plus signs here, which shows you this is the purpose of a scale bar, because this is typically, when we talk about maps have got certain elements that have to be there. We have to have something like a north arrow, which is at the top right, zip, right there. And it explains what it is and why it is there. It has to have often something like a legend, because you must keep in mind that some of the most basic products that you're going to be producing using Geographic Information System is something like this. This is typically a map, and certain information need to appear. We need to tell the viewer or the user of this map where north is, because we cannot assume that this is, by the way, the country of South Africa with the provinces demarcated in black. We cannot assume that this map is orientated to the north. For various GIS applications, depending on if it has to be printed and saved, you might want to turn the map to make an area of interest, which we often call an AOI. We want to have it turned this way, or landscape, and then you have to indicate that north is lying in that direction. Because one thing to also keep in mind is that this map, when a user looks at a map, he or she needs to get all the information they require from the map, without the need for a caption. Okay, so looking at this map, we can already get an indication of what is the scale we are working with, where's north orientated, and then very important, the legend. What do these colors and these shapes on a map tell us? This is very important information. So do not skim if you want to understand, and this will also prevent us having to possibly repeat ourselves in the Q&A, which follows after this presentation of mine, but also on the 25th. Do take the time and look at each of these figures and ensure that you don't miss things like this, the interactive bits of figures or tables, or like these little flip cards I showed up here. When we have a look at the activity, in activity 1, it's something about, it talks about geographic data. And this activity, for example, is a quiz. So unfortunately, it deals a lot with South African examples. So it's like a game. It gives you a bit of information, and then it asks you a question, and you've got a little quiz here. Don't worry if you get it wrong. You're not going to get bad marks at university or anything. But this is just one of the ways that we try and test it, that we try to test the learners. And obviously, as I've mentioned, some of the content of this e-learning material are focused on South African teachers and South African learners. But this is just some of the things we try to do to keep it fun and interactive for learners. But by no means think that this GIS e-learning material are for school children only. There are very advanced concepts dealt with here that will help you a lot when it comes to the practical side of GIS. For example, using the software QGIS, and using the valuable software package called Google Earth Pro, which is often used in conjunction. So, but yeah, this is how cool it is. You know, we got this little quiz, and then you submit your answer here. I think this is the African part. I think this is the FNB Stadium. I may be wrong here. I'm not going to embarrass myself in public. So you know, you typically click there and you can submit, and then it takes you to the next quiz. So this is the example of the one activity. This is a quiz, and then a little bit of geographic data is explained. I spoke to you earlier about important concepts like polygons, lines, and points, and things like that. These are crucial concepts to understand in GIS. And a section like this, for example, when we talk about geographic data, which is data which has got distance and area metrics and things to it. It's got to do with data that can relate to actually physical dimensions on the Earth's surface, or a planet for that matter. One of the cool things you must treat yourself to when you do download Google Earth Pro is you can actually explore the surface of the moon and the surface of Mars. That is how cool it is. So anyway, geographic data applies to everything with relating to geography, and it often contains distance measurements such as area and distance and area rather, metrics with regards. It's got values, and it's got to do with space. Everything's got to do with space. So don't skim if you are new to GIS. It's very important that you understand the theory behind it. And so when we talk here about some of the basic stuff, it is stuff like point, line, and polygon. This is where it all starts. If you're an architect, you work with boxes and shapes and things like that. And so typical examples of points is points of interest. It can be the location of excuse me, I live next to a very busy road. So a point is typically a feature, and these three features, or this type of geographic data, is called vector data. So a point is typically something like where an animal was poached. An elephant was poached, to try and keep to the theme of this series. When an elephant was poached, one wants to navigate to a point. A line is typically a route or a road or a track. And it's got a start and it's got a stop. And then a polygon has got no start and end. It's an enclosed area of any shape, typically. These are very crucial concepts to understand. So definitely don't skim over this and just immediately go on to the practical side of things, especially if you're new to GIS. If you know all these concepts, then by no means, or by all means rather, you're more than welcome to skip to the various practical activities. But I am quite sure that if all of you do make the decision to start this whole course from scratch, I am almost 100% certain that you will learn something. I think even myself, I learned something going through this course material. So that's a very important section, geographic data. And then it talks about things like spatial data. And often our spatial data, the polygons and the lines we've got, has got attribute data. And this is the boring stuff, but the very important stuff. You know, so when we, for example, when we talk about a point and we've got an elephant carcass and maybe an elephant that was poached, you know, we maybe want to record that point, and then we may want to add data to it. What is the type of data we may want to add? We may want to add, is it a male or a female animal that got killed? In what part of the reserve the animal got killed, and so on. Anyway, this is a bit of a graphic example, but you get what I'm saying. And then it moves on to other concepts of GIS itself. This is actually the video I was talking about. I'm not going to play it now. I have been advised by my co-hosts that playing videos may become a smash up, and I'm not going to test the Mac today. So this is a must-watch video. It's a YouTube video. It's produced by Esri Island, and it really goes into what is GIS and how it is used in society around us. Some more technical parts of GIS, components and functions. These are some of the things and the concepts we need to keep in mind when we think about GIS. Maybe you become a GIS consultant like Jonathan Gatworth that will be chatting to you in a week or so's time. And then some things like policies and procedure and software and stuff are crucial things to keep in mind, because GIS consultancy or mapping consultancy is actually becoming more and more important. Now, GIS used to be a scarce skill, but as I've mentioned as well, you know, it's more and more required, especially of university students, to be able to make maps. And especially if you are a postgraduate student, you can, it's often for me sad, and even for my colleagues, but they have realized it by now, is, you know, you can do the most impactful science or research and publish this in a high profile scientific journal out there. But if your map is made in Google Earth, I've actually had a colleague recently, the journal editor is going to turn you around and say, get that sorted out. So this is some of the implications, especially if you're a student, you want to go into the sciences like myself, and you want to build a career as being an academic, for example. You are expected to produce a certain level of map, a certain level of a map. And it cannot be a cut and paste and just a snip from Google Earth. You know, it often needs to contain components and specific features, which is controlled by GIS software. For example, the width of the lines, the colors of the background. Some scientific journals don't even allow color maps, and these are the things you need to keep in mind. So the days of cutting and pasting from Google Earth, it may be sufficient for certain projects, certain reports, and maybe for the public to some extent. But the expectation is kind of generally there to produce something with the use of GIS software, specifically when it comes to map making. When we talk about analysis, you know, then there are many ways to skin that cat. You don't need to have necessarily a GIS software to be able to do something like spatial analysis. You can use normal statistical software for that. When we go on to something like our second activity, it's dealt again. Here we can see points, lines, and polygons and things like annotations. Then there's a little cool activity here that actually shows you how to draw a polygon. Okay, and so when you see the mouse cursor, I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor actually, but when you see the mouse cursor changing shape to a little hand or something, then you know it's a part of the video that you can click on, or you can see here there's shading changing. So these activities in this e-learning material becomes more and more interactive as you progress throughout it. And this is just something that shows you how to create a polygon. And in this activity specifically, it's not a video, as I said, it's a hands-on activity. This actually asks you to draw a map of Africa. And these are also one of the fun activities that we often do in the classroom with teachers. We give them a piece of paper and we give them a piece of string and we let them draw the map of Africa. And it's always it's quite a fun activity because it's quite funny, the type of shapes that come out when people try to draw the map of Africa by heart. So, but these are skills and these are activities that teaches you some of the basic concepts of GIS, points, lines, and polygons, for example. Then the different types of data of GIS. This is becoming more technical and more advanced, but it's still very, very important. And it's typically, you need to be able to make the distinction between raster and vector data. And this is not. I do say it's technical, but people especially, it's a difficult thing to understand raster data. And raster data, basically what it is, it's like a photograph taken from your camera or your cell phone. You know, if you zoom in a lot into any photograph on a computer or on your phone, it starts to do a thing that we call pixelations, which means a photograph on your phone or taken with a camera or taken with a satellite or a drone or whatever for that matter, those are that's raster data. And it's made, that photograph is made up of, it could be millions or it could be thousands of little dots of different colors that actually make up the photograph. You know, if you typically zoom in far enough, you know, you get something that like here on the left-hand side. So these are also very important concepts to understand. And that is because the software packages make reference to these types of data. And then we move on to activity 3. Here it's going to start talking to you about the software package called QGIS. And QGIS stands for Quantum GIS. I started my GIS career or my endeavors with QGIS. These days, I'm a bit rusty on it and I use it very little because I'm spoiled. Why? Because I use ArcGIS, which is the global leader in GIS. However, when we talk about the global leader in open source free software that costs you nothing, then we talk about Quantum GIS. And you know what? It's come such a long way. And it's always amazing for me to see how these software packages develop over the years, how professionals and people with careers give up their free time across the globe to try and develop these various software packages. And it's the same with a software package called Open Drone Map, which I use for my drone mapping workflow. It's really so cool to see the volunteerism that goes into developing packages like that. And at the end of the day, you know, you've got so many heads put together that develop such good software packages. So this talks to you about QGIS, and it also refers you to where you can download it from. Now, remember what I've said earlier, after this presentation of mine, and before Jonathan will even come on board, the hosts of Share Screen Africa, or the administrator of Share Screen Africa, I will provide them with the download links for Mac and Windows for QGIS, as well as Google Earth, and also the link to this series. So do look out for that email. Make sure you check your junk folder so it's not put there. And then you don't need to go into this, and you don't need to go Google. I will give you the links for downloading QGIS. Obviously, here it talks about QGIS 3.4. I think the best thing just to do is, and we will have to update this e-learning material as time goes by, but as long as you use a QGIS version in the range of 3, because they bring out updates often. I think at the moment that 3.24 already, or something like that. I'm uncertain. I actually checked earlier today. And what is noteworthy is that the link that I will send you, I don't know if that's the same link here. When we download QGIS, it's noteworthy to download the LTR, the long-term release. If you download the latest release, which is typically in beta development, you run into the risk of you're busy working on a project and boom, it will bomb out and you may lose all your work. So always try to keep in mind when it comes to QGIS, download the LTR version, unless you're like me and you want to play around with the new big boy stuff. But the safest for you and for your workflows is to stick with the LTR version, whether it's Windows or Mac. Just remember LTR. But I will send out the link specifically for those versions of QGIS. So this is an activity which obviously you can see it downloads QGIS, and then it goes into this interactive activity here. Keep an eye out at the bottom here. It's got interactive little slides that deals with these various components of GIS. And it chats about attributes, it chats about location, and so on. I can see it's loading here at the moment. So please note, if you have any issues, or encountering any issues on this website, let the share screen administrator know about it, so that we can rectify it, so you guys can use it. It's actually concerning, this thing is loading a little bit, but yeah, these are interactive. These activities are interactive again, and you can see these little arrows at the bottom here, and you can just move your cursor around these activities, and when it changes to a little hand, you know that you can actually, or you should, click there to make an action. But yeah, obviously you need to read all the schmeal first. Okay, that is still loading. I will check it out afterwards. If we have to update it, I will do so. So yeah, this is going to chat to you a little bit about QGIS and how to use it to answer these various questions. And then now we're going to more technical stuff, data sharing, data standardization, and data security. And this is probably some of the more boring concepts, but I think for someone like yourselves, if you are working and for an institution, or you're a student at an institution and you are privileged enough to use institutional computers, hardware, and loading software, you don't need to worry too much about security. But it is important that when you maybe start your own business one day and things like that, that you need to be able to store and keep your data relatively secure, even within the institution. You know, you should think about storing GIS data on the cloud. Unfortunately, one of the things about GIS data, it often is large in size. It takes up a lot of storage space. So data standardization, data sharing are very important concepts. For example, there's an example on the left-hand side of our South African identification number. The numbers in South Africa, when you get an South African ID number, it's a standardized system. There's a certain standard that the government, and any government for that matter, works on to keep everything the same. So when we talk about standardization and things like that, you know, we may want to select certain coordinate reference systems. That's a term, those are terms you will encounter. You know, you cannot work with WGS 84 or a web locator system and compare that and have data with a UTM system, you know. So one needs to think about standardizing things, and then especially with regards to things like security when it comes to storing of spatial data. And then also sharing. You know, when you share these days, it's easy to share the data across platforms and for people to download, but don't just throw it open. It's almost like, you know, taking your home or your cell phone Wi-Fi password and making it open so anyone can, you know, connect and drain your data. It's very risky. So, you know, when it comes to things like data sharing, just keep in mind the security aspect of data sharing as well. So there are various ways to skin a cat. As you can see, up until now, I've mostly navigated on the left-hand side there, on the left-hand pane of the screen. But when you are done with each of these sections, you can just click on the bottom there, and it would take you to basically the next lesson. This specifically chats about data integration and data manipulation. These are very, very complicated concepts. You don't need to worry too much about unless you are required by your postgraduate degree to chat about data manipulation. You may have to change the data, especially, for example, we have acquired or we've developed some data within Google Earth and we bring it into a GIS. Then it's important sometimes to be able to change the features. You feel that maybe you've drawn or you've selected a polygon and it's not the correct shape, and you must be able to edit it. Now, QGIS, all these software packages allow you to do that. So that's quite important. And often we want to manipulate and integrate. Actually, at the bottom you can see add multiple layers to one another to get the necessary information out that we require. And then one of the nice activities to do is an activity based around quite an important concept, and that's something like called querying, and statistical analysis, more advanced, but something one often encounters is something like buffering. And buffering is typically, you know, we often have buffers around protected areas where there's no developmental zones, you know, where it's maybe only sustainable use areas. It's a thing that's quite common north of Southern Africa. It's not a common thing, but we use the example of agricultural fields next to a river system. You know, if we farm or closer to a river, you know, it will have an impact on water quality and things like that. So we deal with some of the geoprocessing concepts. These are called, buffering is a type of geoprocessing concept, or one of the tools. So buffering is one of the more important and widely used ones. And so that's why we cover that in the activity. And then something like querying is also important, you know. So we've got a whole bunch of features and stuff, and we only want to select a certain number of features based on a distance from the water. You know, you type it in code and boom, it selects you only a subset of features. You know, so these are all little tools that we can use to extract only the necessary information that we need, because we are not interested in all the information out there. We are interested in a subset of information, but often we get a hold of quite a bit of info, and now we only want to use a little. So you want to be able to tell the computer and tell the GIS software that I'm only interested in that, and that's where a thing like querying comes in. And statistical analysis is something that I more deal with a lot these days. And you may need to as well. You don't always need to use software package like a GIS for it. We often use something like R. I think some of you in the audience here would have used R, program R before. You can actually do GIS in R, believe it or not. I just haven't had the time yet to do that. It's on my to-do list. It's one of my pet projects that I still need to get involved, is to do GIS and remote sensing in R. But at the moment, it's working with GUI-based systems, QGIS. Google Earth Engine, which goes a little bit more into coding, JavaScript, and then Esri ArcGIS. But statistical analysis is important, especially if you're a scientist and you want to become a scientist. Even in conservation and monitoring, you know, we want to apply statistics. We want to know, for example, we get a raster with rainfall across your country, but you want to know maybe only a section of your country, and so you need to query only some of the data, and then you may want to know what is the mean rainfall value across that raster or a section of that raster. So that's when we talk about statistics, means, averages, maximums, and minimums of specific data sets. Okay, and in this case, for example, when we talk about some more advanced concepts, species distribution, modeling the distribution of fish species in the ocean, you've got a lot of data of fish. It's going to take statistical analysis to be able to show you some obvious patterns that you can produce into a map and present at a conference or in a paper or stuff like that. And I've mentioned the actually rainfall as well. And so this activity number 4 is, if I'm not mistaken, you know, it deals with adding raster data into quantum GIS, QGIS. But it also provides you with the data. So that's one of the things that I must mention. And once again, if there are issues with this, then you need to let us know, or the administrators know, as soon as possible, is that you can see here, click here to download the data. So to be able to do these activities on your own computer with your own QGIS, after you follow these various, or while you are following these various screen prompts, you'll need to download the data. So we actually, part of this e-learning course, we provide you with the data as well. And you can just go and download the data. It's in the forms of rasters and shapefiles, and you will see we've provided little links in here. So this is loading. It's probably just, it could be just because it's my Mac. But then we ask you various questions. You know, we talk about an important component here, changing the CRS, or the coordinate reference system. That deals with on how how the canvas of the GIS is warped and how it is displayed, or the Earth's surface displayed on your GIS, because remember, our Earth is round, but it's not always good to work with, with a round projection. So you want a projection in your project that you're busy working with that's flat, like a piece of paper. And so that's basically what CRS comes down to. So these are important concepts that you need to take a look at, and that often at much frustration to the user, if you are not considering things like projection. You are going to have questions later. Listen, why is my data not overlapping? Why is the one layer, excuse me, why is the one layer sitting here and the other one is sitting here, and you've got misalignments and things like that? Most of the time it's got to do because your map projection, your map and your data projections aren't the same. And once again, obviously, the GIS software packages provide you with tools to reproject the layers to get them to align. So, and then we ask you with this activity, how many fields in a 500-meter buffer zone, and we show you how to do the querying. And then we chat at the end, as I've mentioned earlier before, we talk about something like remote sensing. And once again, we've explained it beautifully here. And there's these little flip cards that you must flip around. This is very basic. Again, do remember it is, it's aimed at school kids and school teachers with, that needs to be taken back to basics with regards to these GIS concepts. And so when we talk about sensors and stuff, remote sensing starts with some of the most basics, but it's often got to do with things like drones. Some of you may be involved with using drones, and then more of you may be involved with the use of satellite data. I work a lot with satellite data. I work quite a bit with drone data, and this is all remotely sensed data because it's not something we can touch. It's an instrument sitting at a distance observing another object, and so that's basically it. It's a simple concept, but when it comes to employing it in GIS and what type of information you want to get out of it, you need someone to kind of explain it to you. So this deals with remote sensing. There's a real cool a video here that deals, that deals with LiDAR. I've got some colleagues and peers of mine that use LiDAR data, which is basically laser data, that's provide very, very high quality models of the environment that we often employ with regards to trees and vegetation. And this is a beautiful video that will show you this. And this is some of the more advanced concepts when it comes to remote sensing on GIS. But we do expose you to this. We don't go into the details necessarily, but we do expose you to this. And then here again, we ask you a couple of questions, and you can test your own knowledge. You can select the right answer, and it will tell you yay or nay, or retry here. Spectral resolution, again, very, very technical and advanced concepts, but it's actually part of, believe it or not, it's actually part of the schooling system in South Africa. And so I think, it's important that you at least carry knowledge of this. And, especially myself as well these days, especially with satellite data, we make use of rasters or images data, which contains data which are outside of the human's visible spectrum range, which is red, green, and blue. We talk about things like infrared and laser, ranging with some of our satellites with laser, and some of them, deal with thermal picks up. I think I saw it now recently. It's called a microbolometer or something. It's an instrument that picks up the temperature of a surface. I mean, this is real advanced stuff, but these products give us very valuable information. So, for example, those of you who've worked with satellite data before, and it's even available in drones, smaller, affordable platforms these days, is that, for example, when we want to look at agriculture and even environmental monitoring, when we want to look at plant health, we use the infrared spectrum of satellite images or drone images to be able to compute things like the normalized difference vegetation index, which shows us, points out chlorophyll to us, and plant health in things like an agricultural setting. So these are important concepts. And especially if you go into becoming in consultancy or you start working for drone companies and stuff, these are some of the things you will start to come across. And obviously, if you use satellite data and you have got a plant-based research project that you work with, or thesis, or your dissertation, you're gonna encounter, when we talk about things like spectral resolution of the various sensors. So here we talk about things like even temporal resolution, as you know, how frequently does a satellite take photographs? In this case, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this is the MODIS satellite. Its resolution of its pixels is 250, I think, to 500 meters. And here you can see its temporal resolution is 16 days. Every 16 days, it takes a photograph of the same spot on the Earth's surface. And we are able then to compute things like NDVI, to be able to see how green has changed over seasons, or investigate things like plant health, crop health. And then there's more advanced concepts like radiometric resolution. This is something else that's been added in. You can see there's some data for this activity. It's some additional examples using the solar energy in South Africa. This specifically, I think, has been developed by my colleagues at the Ulwazi node down in the Cape and Howick, I think, by Hayden and Kenilwe. I think they've developed, either one of them have developed this. So this is a really cool advanced activity towards the end of if you have a look on the left hand side here, towards the end of the e-learning material. It's something you'll really enjoy, and you can see here's the type of data files that you will be able to download. So yeah, South Africa, SAON is involved with things like the Bioenergy Atlas and the Vulnerability Atlas, Hayden and them especially. We've actually got quite a bunch of GIS and remote sensing fundis, guys that are even more knowledgeable on some of these concepts than I am within our department. So yeah, once again, if after our Q&A, it's very important that you keep all your questions and stuff after this, or on the 25th or the 18th, whichever date is still to be confirmed, where we will chat to you about various questions that you may have. And if I don't know the answer, I've got access to the right people, and I will be able to get back to you. And then the last, and definitely you would have heard me chat about this. I mean, this has been in my GIS career since forever, and it's amazing open source free software package. It deals with Google Earth. Okay, so Google Earth is something you'll need to download, and Google Earth Pro, which is real cool. It can actually read GIS files these days. Google Earth Pro. It used to be you used to be able to have to buy it, but these days it's free, and it's really cool. And that's often where it starts out, because you've got access to very high global, very high resolution global satellite data across any part of the Earth. And there's even historical imagery, so you can go back and you can draw and do your little products, draw your polygons, your lines. You can even overlay rasters into Google Earth. And this is actually where it often starts. It is put at the end of this e-learning manual, but do keep in mind that this manual is focused on school kids and stuff. But when we talk about starting and where to set up projects and things like that, you're going to start with Google Earth. You're going to play around the Earth's surface and around the world, and your country or your town or your province or your state or wherever, territory for that matter, wherever you are. And you're going to navigate, because it's linked to Google Maps. You can navigate to an address and you can start drawing lines, export it, and then pop it into a GIS for further analysis. And so this little video is aimed at showing you how Google Earth works and the various functions, and it's really, really cool. Okay, so that's the end of it. I've taken about an hour of your time. You can see on the left hand side, on the left hand pane, that it showed little tick marks of the different sections that I've gone through, but when you refresh the page, it will send you back and undo that. The system is not yet up and running to be able to, there's no registration link at the moment here that saves your progress basically in the course. But at the same token, as I've mentioned before, you can navigate to all the various different sections. Sorry, my screen is mirrored. Let's do it like that. And I'm looking in the wrong direction as well. So I think that brings the end to this presentation. It's really just here to present to you guys what this is all about. I show you and chat to you about some of the pulls and the pitfalls, and if there are any pitfalls, you'll let us know. And then do keep in mind, after this presentation, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, or later in the week, we will send out the link to download QGIS to this course, obviously, and the link to Google Earth Pro. And then if you are going to use this in the near future, you feel this is something that's really something that's going to help you, and you think of doing GIS in the future, take this month, do the course, and then we meet back on the 18th or the 25th of April to discuss, and that will only be a Q&A section. And I will have ArcGIS open, I'll have QGIS open, and I will be able to, or I will try rather, I may or may not be able to answer all your questions, but I will try and answer some of the questions. But also, and that's specifically rather to this online course, when you have general software queries, as I believe Jonathan Gatwood, he's a fundi on both software packages. He actually gives courses on interchanging between ArcGIS and Quantum, so you must pop him all those questions. So that's really, really cool that Jonathan is gonna have a chat with you guys. I may actually sit in on it as well. Cool, thank you very much, Johan. I think that's me for now. I've taken your time up for about an hour.
Right, well, first I want to say welcome everyone, because honestly, it's been amazing. We've got people here from Cameroon, Lesotho, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. This is what Share Screen Africa is about. So welcome and thanks, Rion, for putting up such an amazing course. Now, like Rion said, it's up to you guys to decide how much you want from this course. And if you can dedicate this month to building your GIS skills, it will take you far in conservation careers. But also remember, GIS is a transferable skill across the board. So it is something that is worth getting. So put your time and effort into it. And you will see that we have some guest speakers who will be speaking to you throughout the time. Again, one from Nigeria, one from Kenya, and one from Zimbabwe, who's actually residing in South Africa right now. And they will be presenting you different aspects of where GIS can be used. Now, before I open up to questions, the mapping clinic with Jonathan Gatwood, there are 2 of these. And I encourage you to attend. It's not mandatory, but it is well worthwhile, because for 2 things. You may have a question that you want to ask that involves, I'm having a technical difficulty, I need to get past this. Jonathan will ask you to share your screen and he will help you over that problem. Second thing, you may have questions that you never even thought to ask, that somebody else is asking. Now, the best way to learn anything new is to become a teacher yourself. So take this course on and then teach someone at your university or your school, or, you know, if you're a trainer, start something, because that is the best way to learn. So I really encourage you to take part in those mapping clinics. Now, that doesn't just mean that you have to come and say, I have a problem. It might mean that you want to engage a bit further and say, okay, I've created this polygon and now I want to create a buffer. Is there another way to create a buffer than the one we've just been taught? And Jonathan will say, well, actually, yes, there is. There's 3 ways to create buffers. So maybe you want to do it this way or that way. So there's always more ways to get to the end in any of these ARC programs or these GIS programs than one. So don't ever think because you're struggling with one way that there's not another way. You might actually want to just ask, okay, you've taught us how to draw buffers. I work in the sewage industry. How and why am I ever going to use buffers? Like, why are you teaching me that? And Jonathan might engage in discussion, and other students will say, well, hey, I work in water services, and this is where we use buffers every single day. So I really, really encourage you to attend those mapping clinics. Rion, do you want to add anything onto that?
I think thank you very much, Holly, and yeah, thanks to all the attendants for the lovely messages in the chat. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's been a huge pleasure to present this stuff to you guys. And Holly is 100% correct. When it comes to GIS, it's something I haven't mentioned, and thank you for raising that. Jonathan will no doubtably chat to you about all these things. When it comes to GIS, there is more than one ways to skin that cat. There really is, and there are often various tools. For example, Quantum GIS or QGIS has got a function called plugins, and plugins again are developed by people free of charge. And often some of these plugins are better tools to use for argument's sake, developing a buffer than actually QGIS's own geoprocessing tools, as we call it in Esri. So there's definitely more than one way to skin the cat, and yeah, definitely become a teacher, try and educate yourself, and that's exactly the route that I walked. Remember, I had no GIS. I am self-taught in GIS 100%. I have had no formal GIS education. And it was so weird because years later, I was giving to my peers who studied with me. I gave them GIS in class, and some of them obviously took offense to it. But you know, if you have a love for these type of things like geography or anything in life for that matter, it's also enjoyable to teach others. So Holly is 100% correct.
Has anybody got anything pressing at the moment? You can either raise your hand, write it in the chat, or you can just, yeah, I think you have to raise your hand.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Rion. I wanted to ask you, which platforms do you recommend to teach you how to learn how to do GIS on R?
Oof. Yeah, GIS on R, I will not be able to advise you. As I said, I do have a couple of colleagues, and actually mostly a former colleague who's not working for SAON anymore. He's at the University of Cape Town, and he's a very busy man these days, developing syllabus and stuff. But they were able to use GIS and R. So from my side, unfortunately, I'm not going to even stick my toes there. As I said, it is on my to-do list at the moment as well, on my bucket list rather, let me say. I just don't have the time to perform GIS and R. I think, you know, obviously program R is a very effective way of doing most things, especially statistical analysis and GIS as well. But if you enjoy something like clicking buttons and having it easy, I would suggest, you know, rather look into QGIS and this e-learning material and ArcGIS Pro. R is a tough creature. It spits you out on the sand without warning. And it can be very frustrating, and definitely, you know, we don't want you discouraged from GIS because you dive head first into R. So from my side, unfortunately, I won't be able to help you with anything from R. I think the best thing to do is to Google and YouTube. There's so much information out there. Our little e-learning course is but a drop in the bucket of what is out there, even on QGIS and Arc. So unfortunately, no R advice from me today.
However, we do have one of our guest speakers who is on the platform today, Akano Ahmed from Nigeria, and he will bring that up in his talk. Akano, I won't bring it up now, but he uses R for GIS a lot, so he's very good at it. So please save that question when Akano does his guest talk. Any more questions? We have one.
Hello.
Hi.
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much for such an informative session. I have just a question. Can GIS be used to map out subterranean environments, like caves, maybe?
That's actually a very good question. I think GIS can be used to map out anything, basically. Often one of the things that, you know, if you're an oceanographer and so on, you will be interested in bathymetry, which is basically the ocean floor. And a lot of our base maps, if you look at Google Earth as well, the base map has got the ocean floor mapped out for you. So definitely anything is possible. I think the thing with caves is that caves have got vertical structure, you know, so apart from the fact that it's got X, Y, or latitude and longitude shape, you know, caves have also got a Z a value, which is basically your elevation value. But a lot of GIS programs these days, you are able to even engage with data in a three-dimensional space, typically a cave, which is a three-dimensional. So anything is possible. Your biggest challenge will be with something like caves is that if you do data collection in the field, whether it be with a GPS or whatever, you don't have satellites. So, you know, the satellites, you know, ensure your position on Earth, and because you've got solid rock above you, that may be an issue. So that's actually a very, very interesting question. I would suggest going on to a website called ResearchGate, all one word, ResearchGate, and maybe go ask the question there. ResearchGate, open yourself a profile, ask the question there. It's a scientific community, and you'll be actually pleasantly surprised. But I don't know of anyone that has worked with caves. I may have seen maps somewhere of caves and things like that, because it's actually a very important component, because caves often deal with hydrology as well. I mean, that's where, you know, it's linked with hydrology and geology. But when we talk about subterranean stuff, I mean, it's difficult to go do data collection and map it out, because you don't have access to satellites. But there may be some workaround. There may be something like geophysics that can be applied when we do look for aquifers underground and things like that, which will actually show the gaps and things like that, and can be incorporated into GIS. But yeah, that's really a technical field that I haven't encountered before.
Holly, if I can just make a comment, Kefeletswe, I will ask Maret to link you to Dr. Richard Mazibedi from Botswana. He's one of the Share Screen Africa Council members, and he's a cave specialist. So he might know. You know, if there is, yeah, he might just have that knowledge because he works in caves all the time.
Sure. I know him. I'll
Oh, you know him?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. There you go.
Thank you very much.
I actually do have a friend, although I haven't been in contact for a long time, who's a treasure hunter. Now, for those of you here, before countries began to change their laws on found treasure in the ocean from ships that have sunk from centuries ago, he used to go out for 5-6 months of the year after really studying the maps, and then they'd go out and try to find these boats, and they'd obviously get a percentage of the treasure, and they had to map the ocean floor and map the boats when they found them, and then figure out where the treasure might be. Now, I could try to contact him and ask him to do a talk. I am still in contact, but it's been a long time. But I could definitely send you his email if you just message me.
Sure. Thank you very much.
No problem. Do we have any more hands up in the room? Johan, Maret, can you see anyone hands up? Any more questions?
I can see some in chat. Holly,
yeah.
I can see 2 in chat though.
Oh, okay. Can GIS be used for measuring carbon sequestration?
Yeah, definitely. I've actually got a publication that I just found here, open access. But one of the recent products that I came across actually on Google Earth Engine is a carbon map of the world. Believe it or not, at 30-meter resolution. It's insane. And as Sion, with part of the projects that we're doing now, we're actually going to ground truth it with some of the carbon data that we've got. So for sure, anything that's in the soil and this specific provider, you can just type in Google Earth Engine. If you get onto that level of remote sensing and stuff, you just type in their carbon and it will actually pop up all the carbon products, even things like phosphorus and nitrogen maps, well, data, raster data, which covers the globe. However, one must just obviously always be careful, especially when you do research projects and stuff, that this is ground truth because there may be quite a bit of error because it's often satellite data is used and models are used to interpolate the data to predict where carbon is and where carbon is not, and using vegetation and things like that. So most definitely, most definitely.
Okay, so I saw, Mohammed, you've just been answered in the chat. This talk is recorded and it will be put on YouTube, so you can watch it again and again. Samuel, we have a question from you.
Oh, yes, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I am Samuel from Uganda. The reason I actually asked that question is because I'm taking a research on the impacts of land use change on the level of course carbon sequestration. So I was wondering, can I use data like all data say from 2000 up to 2020, and I look at the trends and changes in land use, and can I use that using the changes and observing the changes that have occurred as a result of land use? Can I use QGIS to obtain the amount of carbon in a particular, or the amount of carbon capture and maybe storage in a particular year using QGIS, but using data that has passed already? Thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, any type of data which is it's spatial data, and there is, so the important thing about data, to be able to use data in a GIS, it must have spatial values. It must have typically lat-long location data attached to it. Okay, so I cannot take an Excel spreadsheet or a spreadsheet of data and bring it into QGIS without each of those data points having a latitude and a longitude which places it on the Earth's surface. So if you say you've got land cover values and carbon values, it's very important that where this data has been captured, that you know, each of the data points in the table or whatever has got a latitude and a longitude associated to it. If it is spatial data, definitely you are able to do change maps. One of the things we actually use in QGIS, and it's a very powerful plugin, is called a semi-automatic classification plugin. I've often used it to do land cover classification, to identify what's bare ground, what's trees, and things like that. But you can also use this to do change mapping. In Esri you can, I cannot remember what the plugins are, but you will be able to just Google to do change detection if you want to see how the carbon or the land cover has changed from one time period to another. That's typically what we call time series analysis. We often do it with NDVI, with all kinds of GIS data. Yeah, so it depends on what form your data is in. The important thing with any data that must be imported or that ought to be imported into a GIS, there needs to be location attached to it. And it often takes on the form of a shapefile, a .shp file, or a KML file or KMZ file from Google Earth and things like this, or a GeoTIFF. And so, for example, TIFF is a normal large photograph format, but a GeoTIFF has got geolocation or data attached to it, which is very important because you can't just import any photograph into a GIS system because it's got no geolocation data. So the data needs to have geolocation of some sort attached to it. And these days, all our cell phones and stuff record on the photos a geolocation data. So you should be able to do that.
And just to bring in here, Rion, and for everybody, because this is obviously aimed at environmentalists and conservationists, this is something to be aware of when you do have GeoTIFF photos and you're dealing with endangered or priority species. And this goes for your data sharing and your security. If you've built a map of where all the black rhinos, you know, somewhere in Kenya are, and then you don't have security on your files, then that's suddenly available to everyone. So just be aware of that. Lamek, I have a question. Does GIS and GPS work differently? I'm going to not answer that now because you will cover that in the course. And I think that that's quite an important question, but one that I think, Rion, am I correct that it's in the beginning of the course?
I think GPS is dealt with in the course. I think so, but I can just do a quick answer in case it isn't. I think it's dealt with because GPS we often use in conjunction with things like Google Earth and stuff. So GPS basically just collects points, lines, and polygons for you. And you need to transfer GPS data onto a computer with various software packages to be able to use it in a GIS. So a GPS typically, you can basically look at shapes on the Earth's surface, but you cannot do any analysis. You cannot work with data on a GPS. A GIS is a very advanced software package where you can manipulate data, you can analyze data, you can share it, print it, develop more data from that.
Okay, we have a question from Wonga, which I'm going to read because I can't find him to unmute. He is a GIS technician and qualified drone pilot looking to integrate technologies for environmental conservation, mapping, and monitoring. What is the possibility of using QGIS to process imagery?
Yeah, GIS, as I said, it's a very, very, very powerful software program. It's the most powerful out there, which is free of charge, which costs you nothing. Whether it's a GIS or a QGIS, that is what the GIS is for, to process imagery. I've mentioned earlier about maybe you weren't here, but I mentioned earlier about multispectral. So for example, when we get images from drones or satellites, which is multispectral, which contains the infrared band, we use those various layers that camera takes, the various bands of the camera, to do processing. And one of the processing we may want to do is develop an NDVI map using that data. So that is specifically what GIS is for, not only just to view stuff, but to do a lot of analysis and processing, from mathematical processing, spatial analysis, all kinds of stuff. QGIS is the whole package. It's just a free version. ARC and those things. For example, one of the other common things that we may want to use is proximity analysis. You may want to know how far are points from one another, and we call it nearest neighbor analysis. So the processing is insane, and we typically call it geoprocessing. From clipping, buffering, for example, is a type of processing as well.
Fantastic. So any more questions? Johan, Maret, can you see any in the messages?
I think there was I think our first question was asked by Mohammed Shatima Musti. I just want to chat to him, answer that quickly. He says, his QGIS skills are elementary, but can he use ArcGIS desktop for this program? Now, I'm assuming that he's referring to whether he can use ArcGIS to do our e-learning course. He will be able to, but unfortunately, those little videos and those activities specifically deal with QGIS. And unfortunately, Quantum GIS and ArcGIS, the GUI and the layout and the ways of performing certain functions are very, very different. So you may find it quite struggling. The whole idea of this e-learning material is to also expose you to QGIS, which is a free software package. When we talk about things like Esri GIS, I mean, Esri offers some free courses online to do various processing and various functions. And I think it's probably best to go visit Esri's website, especially if you're institutional software and stuff like that. You'll have access to even more courses and things like that. So you probably will not be able to use ArcGIS desktop, and it's counterintuitive because the whole purpose of our e-learning material is to actually teach you QGIS, and it's specifically we specifically only deal with that. There was no need for us to deal or present the workings of Esri ArcGIS because it's a paid software package, and there are many courses available there, paid and free ones online, and many people do not have access to ArcGIS.
Okay, there is a question from, and I'm afraid pronunciation, Taratsasine. Is GIS used in discovering and analyzing climate change impacts on farming activities?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, GIS is used to identify areas where the climate may have been changing. So, for example, maybe you go to the WorldClim repository for downloading climate data of the whole world. I think it's 1 kilometer resolution is the finest resolution of that raster data. And you start processing the imagery and you see, listen, you try and see which in different years you do a time series analysis, or different years, or you get an average value, or you look at the ranges and things like that to see how the climate has changed, temperature, rainfall, humidity, whatever, over the last couple of years, decades, and so forth. And then you can link that to things like crop health. You can link that to some of the well-known botanical products out there is called annual and net primary production. That is the amount of plant production in biomass that is happening on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis for that matter. And you are able to overlay and do some very intricate and complicated analysis. But this is typically the type of things that are made easier in a platform like Google Earth Engine, which has got to do with JavaScript coding. It uses JavaScript coding, but there's also a lot of resources available and satellite imagery and data products available on Google Earth Engine to be able to use. And one of the things about Google Earth Engine, a lot of us don't have very strong computers, because strong computers are often needed to perform very sophisticated analysis, and strong computers are very expensive. So the nice thing about Google Earth Engine, which is not dealt with in this course, it's the difference from Google Earth Pro. Google Earth Pro is something completely different, which is dealt with in the course. Google Earth Engine is an analysis, remote sensing analysis platform. But you're literally using Google's computers to do the analysis for you. So you don't even need a very sophisticated computer. But that is where you can do funny processing and very, very advanced stuff and modeling. One of the things you'll be able to do is things like modeling in Google Earth Engine. So for example, for my studies, I was interested in a product, but only of a certain section and only of a certain time. Google Earth Engine, you quickly write the code and it extracts only that for you. You download it and then you can work further on your GIS. So very advanced. You can basically do any type of change detection, vegetation, climate. If there's a data product available, which there mostly is, because remember, we've got so many satellites out in space and we've got so many organizations and institutions developing further products from that satellite imagery. And you can do it yourself as well. So I develop my own NDVI products in GIS. You can ask Google Earth, or you can download existing ones, but you can also develop a lot of these products yourself within GIS, because it's an equation. It's called a raster. You do it typically in a raster calculator in QGIS, and you make your own NDVI maps over time. So the possibilities are really endless when we talk about GIS.
Fantastic, thank you. I had never heard of Google Earth Engine before in my life, so that was eye-opening. Dixon just wants to confirm that in your course, you do talk about moving the data from your GPS that you've used in the field into QGIS to make the map.
I'm not 100% sure. It may not have been covered. I don't think it is covered, but it's a relatively simple procedure. There is a plugin called GPS plugins. It may actually be a standard feature part of QGIS, where you plug your GPS with a cable in the computer, and the plugin will assist you to download all the data onto GIS. So it's really not a complicated matter. There's a plugin available, and once again, if in doubt, just go and Google GPS import QGIS in Google, boom, and it will throw out videos and documents and all kinds of stuff. Remember, one thing I've learned with things like QGIS and statistical analysis for that matter, even though I often sometimes do feel like I'm the only one that has encountered these problems. But when it comes to GIS, if you have a specific problem, I can guarantee almost 99.9% that there's someone else out there with that problem. And the problem has been taken to Google or some forum, and it has been addressed by experts. Okay, so if you have a specific problem, Google it. The solution is almost always there, because you are almost never the first person out there in this world to have encountered a specific problem, whether it's a software issue, downloading or whatever, or whether it's an analysis or processing issue, or just simple things. It's been dealt with out there before. You just need to use Google, use as little words as possible, keywords, and it will pop out, and you'll get to an answer eventually. But with some more advanced concepts, it may be an issue where I've had to contact scientific paper authors to tell me, listen, what are you doing here? The publication itself hasn't been informative enough, and I literally have to engage with them personally to be able to. But the chance that there's that you will have to contact me personally to be able to ask a question, get an answer, is highly unlikely to non-existent. The concepts that we cover in this e-learning material, if you struggle with the concepts, if you don't understand it, and if you run into issues with the stuff that I covered, you'll find a solution online in Google, no doubt about it.
Okay, I think I don't see, Jan, any other questions coming in? And I think we are over time here, ladies and gents, but thank you very much indeed for your time once again. Rion, I think everyone, or I hope everyone, is very excited to get going with this course. So for those of you who are left, please get going and let's enjoy, and we'll see Jonathan at the next mapping clinic, and we have our guest speakers coming up. Once again, if you do miss any of the guest speakers, it will be put on our YouTube channel. So don't worry if your Zoom's bad, but the time to ask questions is in the live session. So thank you everyone, and have a good evening or day, whichever time zone you are in.